So the Biden the Biden Harris debate, the Harris Trump debate. Sorry, yeah, wow, pretty wild indeed. But we're not going to sort of have a look at it from that point of view today. Instead, today we're going to look at a conservative who was a top advisor for the UK, the Conservative Party, to advise on foreign policy. And we're going to have a look at it from that point of view. I think this is kind of interesting. I'm going to disagree with what some of this guy says. I have a very different view when it comes to sort of UK foreign policy on this guy. So I'm going to disagree with what somebody says, what some of his stuff that he's saying, where and, how and its, importance of stuff, etc. But that's what we're going to have a look at today. But that whole debate, wow. I mean, Trump lost it. Trump completely lost it. And I said on Geoscope on Tuesday before the debate, Harris's best idea, her best plan of attack is to go in, attack Trump, and just see him lose it. And that's exactly what she did. And it did not take her long to poke the bear before he absolutely lost it and then started spewing an insane conspiracy theory that immigrants were going in and eating cats and dogs. And bear in mind, this is something that they actually tried to import from the UK because this is something that our own crazy, kooky right wingers have been trying to push as well, that swans and ducks are being eaten by these immigrants. Again, no evidence for it. No evidence for it either in America. And as we now found out, that was spread by, by someone who is, a bit of a neo-Nazi, shall we say. So yeah, that was interesting, shall we say at least. But anyway, we're going to have a look at this. I think this is a very interesting way to sort of view this. Most people have already sort of viewed it to death one way and say this, but again, I want to look at this way from a foreign policy perspective, what was said here. And like I say, we're looking at from someone who's a very sort of UK conservative, advised the Conservative Party as a foreign policy expert. Again, I come from the left. I will be disagreeing him on some of these points. So we'll have a look what he's got to say. And I think it's just a different way to have a look at this conversation when everyone has already really been mulling over a lot of the other stuff. So before we do get into this, though, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button down below. There are links to my Patreon page, the One-Off link, where you can buy me coffee and buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, the Pony Club down below as well. And of course, don't forget to click the like, share, and subscribe button. That will help support the channel. And of course, let's crack on then into this. So over we go to Conservative Home from Gavin Walsh with the title of Naive, Self-Obsessed Trump Now Lets Harris Ignore Biden's Foreign Policy Failures. So he is basically going to say, you should be focusing on what Biden's foreign policy failures are. A lot of the stuff of foreign policy, some of it has its roots in the Trump presidency. We'll see if Garvin here can be again honest about that, but we'll see what he's got to say. So, as Harris, having drawn lots bounded in from the right of the stage, much now a larger, now slow-moving man, now shiftily made his way to the podium on the left. They shook hands about 3/4 away across the stage, and an authentic New York brontosaurus confronted by an agile velociraptor from California. Trump's advisors had given him one clear mission: keep calm and talk about immigration. He followed the second half of that advice to the letter. Talking of an American besieged now by Venezuelans and now ripping into Harris's record as a border czar, Harris's campaign say that her mission was now limited to actually addressing the root causes of immigration, not border policing. Trump was able to start landing blows, while Harris appealed to be halting and very nervously on the economy. Again, I would disagree on that. I think Harris landed a great blow on him when she brought up the fact that, as was right, we had a border deal ready to go. It could have helped solve a lot of the problems that they are facing at the border. But what happened? Donald Trump killed the bill. He made some phone calls to kill the bill so that in this election, he could run on immigration. He could make it an issue he could run on. That, to me, is someone you do not want in power, anywhere near power. But it does go to show you, still, by the way, the level of influence Trump still has in the Republican Party. Whether that will fade after this election, time will tell, but we will see. So, anyway, it continues. She then recovered her composure on abortion, and Trump then floundered by trying to take credit for appointing anti-abortion judges to the Supreme Court while trying to avoid responsibility for their overturning of the Roe v. Wade judgment that protected abortion in the United States. And that, bear in mind, Harris should make this a big point of the election, and she is. And I'm really glad that they are, because I was saying this is what Biden needed to do as well. But with Harris running on this, I think that sends a really big message on this. And I think having a plan to make to find a sort of a way back so that this protection gets once again folded out across the United States, not it being a quote states' rights issue, which it should never be, because you now, as everyone had always said, what you will end up with a massive patchwork of different abortion rights, and some states going massively draconian on it. And guess what? That's exactly what we are seeing. And then he lost his cool, claiming that the babies would then be executed after they were born if Harris had her way. Again, never happened. Immigrants were then eating pets and cats, and that she hates Israel. Like I say, this debate went pretty off the rails pretty much quickly, but I think everyone's covered that to death by now. So, for much of the debate, Harris did lay into Trump personally, quoting generals who called him a disgrace and foreign leaders who laughed at him. It made him furious, and he was unable to control himself, at one point portraying Ashley Babbitt, shot by the Secret Service while storming the Capitol, as a martyr and an example of what psychologists would call projection, and accusing Biden of being in the pay of Ukraine, China, and even Russia. So, first of all, the whole Ashley Babbitt thing, she's not a martyr. It was made very clear. You can even see the videos, all the Secret Service people saying, with their guns out, saying, do not cross the line, do not climb through the window. They were warned multiple times, and guess what? What's the saying? F about, find out. Well, she did find out. Anyway, back to this. So when it came to show that he had international support, Trump cited Viktor Orban. That's not much of a surprise, since Orban has now been positioning himself for some time as the only European leader who could talk to Trump. And again, having Viktor Orban, especially some of the stuff that is now coming out, that Orban starting to not seem as strong as he once was in Hungary, because as all these things with these strong leaders, when they come in, sooner or later, if you aren't seen to be fixing these problems, people then start to turn around and go, oh, actually, has the other side had a point for quite a while that actually to solve these problems, we need to do these and solve a lot of this other stuff, not what Viktor Orban's saying and, just blaming immigrants for everything. Like I say, these types of strongmen only last for so long. Look what happened in Poland. 10 years of the Peace and Justice Party gone because of everyone in Poland really figuring out, oh, hang on, these guys aren't really a good government. So there's more to it than that. I'm sure my Polish viewers will agree. But, TDLR, we don't have full time to go into it. But anyway, back to this. So what was more interesting was, of course, the reason that Trump gave. He suggested that the Hungarians had said that Trump made other countries afraid. Yeah, for all the wrong reasons, not the right ones. This is, of course, Trump's appeal to Americans now in foreign policy. It is, of course, a bad and dangerous world out there, but I'm scary enough to cope with it, and I'll be on your side. It was no coincidence that Trump argued that major wars in Ukraine and Gaza had broken out on Biden's watch. And yet, we must stress this, people are not afraid of Trump for like, oh, he's good because he will, be projecting, America's strength or anything like that. People are scared of Trump because he's more likely to abandon Ukraine. And if you were to abandon Ukraine, as we've said multiple times, Putin now, with the army that he's got, probably going to go into another country, potentially Georgia, given the stuff, and almost exactly the same type of stuff that was going on in Ukraine in their revolution in about 2014, 2013, with them wanting to join sort of the European Union. Putin can't have that, so potentially they're on the list. Moldova as well, potentially on that list as well, and of course, if Trump is in, what's to stop maybe Putin saying, right, I'm going to close off the Slovakia gap, not anything else or just that, just to put pressure and test NATO. Take a border town, not go for like a full scale invasion, just take a border town and try and fracture NATO. Because we know potentially Trump would not respond. And this is the big worry that has undermined years of European security and defense policy, that, America would be there. But now, really, quite thankfully, a lot of European countries have now gone, okay, we might be on our own. And it's not just the realization that this might be Trump that might do this, because there's plenty of other Republicans, wacky, crazy Republicans, that if they get their chance to run, they would be potentially standing on that exact same policy proposal. So this isn't just a Trump problem. This is a further, potentially future crazy Republican problem that we as Europeans potentially would have to deal with. So, back to this. So, there is something to be said for this argument. Okay, let's see what he's got to say for this argument. If the law of the jungle applies, a powerful United States can command respect, and a weak one will be taken advantage of. One can imagine George W. Bush, John McCain, or even Nikki Haley making that kind of case. Other countries might grumble, but the US economic and military dominance is such that their opposition will be limited. Really, we should not be operating in law of the jungle, operandi. That is a very bad way, I think, to sort of promote foreign policy, that only like the powerful really get to dictate what they do. Otherwise, this is how potentially wars break out. I think we should always be going really for diplomacy first. Ultimately, end of the day, and if you want to look at what's going on in Gaza, ultimately at the moment, there were multiple peace deals that time and time again Netanyahu has decided to go, I'm not going to do it because I want to continue doing what I want to do in Gaza. And to a point, this is now starting to annoy a lot of Democrats who said, you've had this peace deal for why did you not take it? Even they are starting to get frustrated with that. And you can tell from the way that Harris has been talking about some of this stuff as well. She's not going to be as kind or as nice to Netanyahu and to Israel when she comes in. So back to this. So even at the height of the tensions, of course, over Iraq, for example, France and Germany limited themselves to refusing to now join America's war. That didn't, of course, coordinate a European international payment system, for example, now to try and weaken the dollar's influence or even pursue a genuinely independent European military. Because they wouldn't do that. You would need a more united European effort rather than just France and Germany. Don't get me wrong. That would have been an incredibly powerful signal to send over America's invasion of the Iraq war. But they didn't do it. Because there are, again, political, economic things you need to take into consideration when you do that. France and Germany do a lot of business with America. Taking out of America for the international payment system would be very, very bad for France and Germany. So again, it's not too dissimilar, because it's getting, of course, what we did to sort of Russia, taking them out of the international payment system. Again, it's not analogous. But also a generally independent European military, that has slowly been happening. That has slowly been happening, really, even before Trump. That has been something that even Obama was pushing for, that Europe needed to have its own stronger military. So that has slowly been happening, over time. Baby steps, yes, but that has been slowly happening over time, and a more integrated European military efforts as well. But that was because, of course, the United States still guaranteed the security of Europe through NATO. Its presence in Europe obviously prevented European countries from developing armed forces that would allow them to act independently of America. That's completely false, I think, fictitious. European countries could absolutely develop their own armed forces independently. They chose not to, because they were part of NATO, and that was part of their, the whole European security agreement. But there was nothing technically stopping them from doing that, to allow them to act independently of America if they wanted to. Part of the big push for this that has really sort of sped this up is because of Trump, and of course the real threat that he might get in again and maybe follow through on that NATO thing, which could cause a lot of further problems down the line. So if anything, we are seeing European militaries going, okay, we need to prepare for the fact that, well, what if America doesn't come in? What if we've got a Trump 2.0 that, maybe Putin just crosses in, takes a border town, and just goes, I'm just taking this border town. I'm not going any further. But I don't know, Poland triggers Article 5. Does America respond? And if it's a Trump 2.0, we don't know. This is why I think you're seeing a lot of European countries now really start to seriously look at military spending on this, not just because of the stuff that's going on in Ukraine as well, but because of this guarantee that had been there for so long that America would come in and be like a pillar of like European sort of defense strategy. That is now gone. So yeah, definitely needs to do a lot of other stuff. But there's also, again, stuff with Germany, stuff like that. There's a really bigger, wider conversation about European military buildup and etc. In the rest of Europe. So yeah, don't have too much time to go into it, but there's a very much a wider conversation really to have at some point. So where we are, so so European countries acting independently from America. Trump instead now sees NATO as a protection racket through which the US military is now hired, rather than an alliance protecting America as well as European security. Here's Trump's self-image now as a new Teddy Roosevelt, a bully, but our bully, clashes now with his own narcissism. He wants to be known as the guy who does deals to end wars. And to be honest, they are very, very bad deals to end wars. He obviously ended the war in Afghanistan by bypassing the Afghan government and releasing over 5,000 Taliban terrorists, and handing the Biden administration the job of trying to administer this defeat. Something that constantly a lot of people do ignore. So I'm glad he is bringing this up, that actually happened. And those 5,000 terrorists that he released were actually very critical to the Taliban regaining control of Afghanistan. That was very critical to them allowing that. And that was a bad deal that Trump did, which Biden then had to inherit on this. He would, of course, now end the war in Ukraine, he says, but there is now very little doubt that would come at Ukraine's expense. Asked if he wanted Ukraine to win this war, he actually refused to answer. His interest now is in the photo opportunity of peace rather than actually a lasting international order. And that is, I think, the big worry. If Trump does win, he will throw Ukraine under the bus. And that is something we as Europe would really have to significantly start to step up to try and replace a lot of the weapons that would no longer be coming now from America. When he was pressed on Ukraine, he invoked the dangers of Russia's nuclear arsenal. Some might say it is very prudent to pay heed to Russia's nuclear threats, but an American president cannot seem to be acknowledging them without also undermining nuclear deterrence. That's very true. Harris, meanwhile, had very little to say on foreign policy, except giving the impression that hers would be a conventional, muscular internationalist administration. She repeated her promise now to equip the United States with the most lethal fighting force it has ever had and try and uphold the international norms. She almost said international law, but checked herself at the very last minute. This left her open to a critique of naivete. And again, I don't think so. I think Harris could be very, very good when it comes to foreign policy. It'll be very interesting to see who she appoints as the top foreign policy guy in America's government when she comes through. We'll see who she ends up listening to, and we'll see what happens. You know, in her first 100 days, how is she going to sort of tackle the stuff with Ukraine? What she got to say about Gaza now that she's not part of the Biden administration? That's going to be very interesting to see what she does on a lot of that stuff. So the Biden-Harris administration implemented Trump's deal with the Taliban. It could have been chosen to keep a very relative small number of troops there, renegotiate it. It might have even accepted an ignominious defeat. Biden wanted out of Afghanistan. Multiple Americans, including Trump, had said that they would pull out of Afghanistan. Biden actually kept his word on that and pulled out of Afghanistan. Now, what happened after, of course, that's up for debate. But Biden kept his promise. He said, we are pulling out of Afghanistan. We do not need to keep our boys there any longer. We're going to pull out. And he did. What happened after, I think that's a separate conversation. But Biden kept his promise on pulling out of Afghanistan. The Biden White House didn't think Ukraine could be defended. And it even advised Kiev to now prepare for guerrilla warfare against the Russians. Only Zelensky's physical courage and urgent weapon supplies by the UK and Poland shamed them into providing more support. Again, I would say that is a very, very bad way to sort of phrase that because America was supplying weapons as well to Ukraine. You say, oh, it was only the weapons supplied by UK and Poland. No, America was supplying weapons before that as well. When it became very clear, especially after the whole defense of Kyiv, that's where America really started to turn it around, and the rest of the world started to change its mind that yes, Ukraine really could defend itself, but it needed Western weapons in order to be able to sort of make a more level playing field on this. And of course, when it comes to supplying weapons, tanks first and then fighter jets, the White House then joined Germany in a turtle tag team to see who can be the slowest. Even now, it prevents Ukraine from using missiles supplied to actually strike Russia, while Russia grinds down the Ukrainian army and devastates its electrical grids and heating infrastructure. Again, I think that's stupid. They should be allowing Ukraine to use those missiles. The whole Storm Shadow issue should be really just moved on from. Just allow them to use those missiles. We know we've been and seen red lines before. They, at this point, they do not exist because remember, Putin's biggest red line was if you, cross the line and take Russian territory, we'll break out the nukes. Hasn't broke out the nukes yet. So, with of course more American weapons, the war would have been already over. That's true. That is very true. And it's not just American weapons, it's if the West had really committed to the Ukrainian cause very, very much sooner and early on, this wouldn't have happened. Had they been sent by 2021 after Russia had practiced sending troops to Ukraine's border back in April, but before the real deployment actually began in the winter, the war might not have started. Potato, 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 whatever. Would Russia still have invaded knowing that Ukraine had weapons back in like Western American weapons back in 2021? Absolutely. I think they still would have invaded. I think this was very, very much something Vladimir Putin wanted to do. I think he saw it as the time to do it. And that's why ultimately he went the way that he did. I don't think sending weapons at that time might have deterred Putin. But it also depends what type of weapons. Do we, are we talking about, the F-16s and tanks? That would have sent, I think, a very strong position. Again, it depends what type of weapons you're really talking about there. So instead, now Putin interpreted the very limited US support as a signal that Biden would not back Ukraine to the hilt. We released signal intelligence, of course, or at least the US did, warning Ukraine that, Putin did intend to invade. Even Ukraine at that time, if you look back when that first lot of stuff was coming out, the Ukrainians were like, what? What? They're going to invade? They didn't even potentially even believe them to begin with when that evidence first started coming out that there was going to be a Russian invasion. So, and remember, big part of releasing that information out early was put out by Biden himself and, of course, other people from his team expressly saying, we are putting this information out because we want to say, Russia, we know what you're doing. We know what you are planning. Pull back from this now. Of course, they didn't. And, the situation as it is in Ukraine at the moment. Like I say, it ain't going well for Russia at all. Even though they are making advances, they are taking completely unsustainable losses, at least 1,000 people a day. That is a lot of people to lose. Even Russia's infinite manpower argument that you often see get deployed, yeah, that can't withstand that type of loss. It just cannot, fundamentally. So Putin understood the US correctly. He only underestimated the courage and determination of Ukrainians. I still think the US would have supported Ukraine, even if there had been. We knew, for example, go back to what's been mentioned earlier, prepare for guerrilla war. There's stuff over here that the CIA had been there training, preparing Ukrainians for guerrilla warfare, what they need to do for that. We know that there is guerrilla warfare currently going on behind the lines in some of these Russia-controlled sections by Ukrainians. So did certainly help, but would we have seen a more an America helping to equip like Ukrainian guerrillas? I think we probably would have potentially at that point. So yeah, I think it just depended on like the type of support that they were thinking, but the whole, when it comes to this whole thing of would have Russia steamrolled in and just taken all this, no, the Russian army really couldn't have done it. If you look back at the 2014 invasion, where they were sort of hit back and they were pushed back, the writing on the wall of what was going to happen in this, I think, was already there, and there were a lot of people saying it, but of course they were ignored by the other people saying, "Oh my God, Russia is like this peer military to the United States." I think that myth has long been gone, but I think even this guy may be drinking a bit of that Kool-Aid on that front there. Yet Trump's own weakness and now obsession with his image of being a deal maker meant that he could only make this traditional Republican argument. Instead, Harris could say Putin would now eat him for lunch, and she was right. And yeah, she was 100% right on that. I think when you look at sort of foreign policy and what came out from there, really, Trump came across as very, very weak. He said, "Oh, I'm going to be big, strong man, Mister Deal Maker." He didn't really make a lot of foreign policy deals that turned out to be quite good. I mean, look at what the legacy has been of North Korea. Yeah, he went and met with Kim Jong Un, but now you've got a Kim Jong Un who has said that the only way to reunite Korea is through war. Did Trump really achieve a peace deal by talking down Rocket Man? Certainly doesn't seem like it, with given the actions of how he's been going on in North Korea. Um, Ultimately, if it comes to sort of foreign policy and on that, it's certainly Harris does come across as a lot more credible, when she was coming across as that. Trump, if all you've got is Viktor Orban saying, "Yeah, he's cool," I think Orban's days in power are numbered. Definitely, if you look at sort of polling, you know, it's very obvious now. The Hungarians are like, "Well, hold on, this guy's been in power for so long, promised he's going to solve all these things, etc., etc." They haven't really been solved, So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens, obviously, there in Hungary, but I think his days are numbered. I think Trump came across as very, very weak. This guy might say, "Oh well, we should have gone after him harder for doing these things." Again, yes, could have, hindsight 2020, wonderful thing, and all that stuff. But we are where we are. Would have Trump, if Trump had won back in 2020, would of the Ukrainian war had happened? Absolutely. Except there would probably just be absolutely zero support from America because Trump does not care about Ukraine. I think he's made that very clear on a number of occasions, especially people like JD Vance have made that also very clear as his running mate, as well as of some of like the crazy MAGA Republicans as well have made that very clear as well. It's worrying. It's worrying on a fact that, is this the end of Trump? Yes. Is Trumpism over? Probably not. But maybe that's another video for another time. But anyway, we've been going along for quite long on this one. So yeah, let me know what you think down below. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.